said, the timeline actually starts out on June 13th of 1969. So Dennis Martin, his 9-year-old brother, Doug, his father, a Knoxville architect, Bill Martin, and his grandfather, Clyde Martin, went on a camping trip in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This was a family tradition that they did every Father's Day weekend. The family planned to hike through Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The group spent the first night in the Russell Field with Dr. Carter Martin of the Huntsville, Alabama, and his 2 sons. The first day in the park went without a problem, no issues. It is now Sunday, June 14th, 1969. So on the second day of the trip, the Martins hiked to Spence Field and met with friends and extended family. At around 3 p.m., there were also conflicting reports that this was closer to 4:30 p.m., but between 3 and 4 p.m., the children decided to pull a prank on the adults, and they hid behind some bushes to surprise them, kind of just off into the trees. 3 of the boys hid together while Dennis went in another direction. It wasn't very long before the boys emerged from their hiding spots to scare the adults, but they soon noticed that Dennis didn't come out from his hiding spot. His father immediately scoured the area looking for the boy and called out his name, but there was no response. Now, this was less than 5 minutes, so they ran into the bushes to hide. In less than 5 minutes, the boys came out, and Dennis was gone.
And they saw which direction he ran. He didn't go with the other boys, but he ran in a... Yeah, they saw where he went.
They knew what direction he ran in, and within 5 minutes, the parents, all the adult men in the group split up and started searching for him. Like 5 minutes after, that's... You think about a 6-year-old kid, how far could they get in the woods in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Could they go far enough where they wouldn't hear you yelling? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think an adult could, running.
Yeah.
But...
if they're trying to get away?
I just think of, my own kids at 6, they'd be too scared to go too far.
Yeah.
Without anyone there.
So, I mean, that is the first really puzzling part of this is, less than 5 minutes passes, and Dennis is already missing, and something happened to the point where he's far enough away that he can't hear his dad yelling. Yeah. So the adults quickly searched the nearby forest, hiking up and down several trails looking for Dennis. William covered miles of trails, frantically calling for Dennis. Without radios or any way to communicate in 1969, no cell phones, with the outside world, the Martins came up with a plan. Clyde, the grandfather, hiked 9 miles to the Cades Cove Ranger Station for help. Unfortunately, that night, a really bad thunderstorm moved in, and in a matter of hours, the storm dropped 3 inches of rain on the Smoky Mountains, washing out trails and leaving what they suspect no evidence of Dennis, whose footprints would have been swept away. So that is the first kind of bad news in this whole case, is that, of course, the night he's missing, a terrible storm moves in, 3 inches of rain gets dropped.
Yeah.
In an area that's prone to flash flooding, and any evidence of Dennis would have been washed away. So that is the first kind of wrinkle in this case. So it is now, what did I say? The 14th was Saturday, so now it's Sunday, June 15th, 1969 at 5 a.m. This is when the search kicks off. So we could say Dennis went missing, 3 p.m., 3:30 p.m., and 5 a.m. the next morning, the search is already starting. So the National Park Service put together a crew of 30. The search party that day quickly swelled to 240 people as volunteers poured in. And Joe is showing some pictures from the search and rescue. The really interesting thing about this case is how many people ended up searching for Dennis. We'll get into I'm going to go into the search and rescue in detail because the National Park Service actually released a very detailed documents on this search, probably through a FOIA request. And
yeah,
there's a lot more detail that I just couldn't put into the episode because it would have taken us, 5 hours to go through it. But so I'm going to try and hit the bullet points of the search and rescue. I think normally we wouldn't go into the search in this kind of fashion, but this was the largest search in national park history.
Well, even these pictures that was a well-documented imagery for that time.
Yeah. And
we don't see a lot of these types of pictures in here.
No.
And when we do these cases that are that old.
And actually, this case was kind of the reason why the National Park Service kind of started changing how they did search and rescue operations. We'll get into why later on. But so like I said, the first day of the search happened June 15th, 1969, and we already have 240 volunteers searching. The search party included park rangers, college students, firefighters, Boy Scouts, police, and actually 60 Green Berets. So they had special forces there as well. But without clear directions or an organizational plan, the searchers crossed the national park looking for evidence. Experienced MPS personnel and other experienced persons began a drainage search down the west prong of the Little River, Anthony Creek, Little Bald, and Spence Field drainages. The trail search continued with 2 visitor horse parties going up Anthony Creek, one on the trail to Spence Field, and the other on Ledbetter Ridge Trail to Russell Field. 30 Boy Scouts camped at Derrick Knob, walked west on the AT to Spence, and 8 Boy Scouts camped at Russell Field, walked down Jenkins Ridge Trail. So,
well, they had like Boy Scouts involved. They'd like just threw like the whole.
Yeah, you're going to get the impression that a lot of people wanted to help, but you've got a lot of really inexperienced people in search and rescue looking for Dennis, which in the end will hamper, I believe, the operation itself.
Yeah.
I'm also going to reference, because I pulled a lot of this from the MPS document, we're going to reference a lot of different ranger names. They're not necessarily important to the case, but there's so many MPS officials working on this case. So Ranger Nichols contacted 51 Ranger students from Lake City, Florida Junior College who were on a field trip near Franklin, North Carolina, and directed them to the area. 9 Jeeps. We have 4 Ranger Jeeps, 2 maintenance Jeeps, and 3 JCCC Jeeps, which I'm not sure what those are. We're all joining the search and, driving the trails and off-road trails that they could. So it is now June 16th, 1969. It's a Monday. So trail and drainage searches continued. Areas covered previously were checked again, especially the immediate drainages from Spence Field. Rangers Nielsen and Huffman took several rescue squad personnel into the brush and began a grid pattern search at the Spence Field area. The Tennessee Air National Guard 134th Air Rifle Group, McGee-Tyson Air Force Base from Knoxville, Tennessee, sent 17 men to Cades Cove. They actually ended up establishing a heliport at Cades Cove in the field immediately west of the sewage disposal area.
Here's a JCCC Jeep.
Okay.
It is a Jamaican Classic Car Club.
Weird.
Yeah. I don't know. That's JCCC Jeep, but maybe that's something different. Like that's a club that collects these things, but that's what popped up.
It looks like an old military Jeep.
Yeah, that might be what it is.
Yeah. So like I said, they already had a heliport established at Cades Cove. I mean, they really treated this like a military operation when we get into all the details of the search. So the Cades Cove Ranger Station received hundreds of offers from individuals and organized groups interested in searching for Dennis. Jeeps, portable radios, maps, and bloodhounds were among the offers. Many people having dogs were told to try their animals. A few did arrive but were unable to get any results. The heavy rains from the first night were thought to be a factor. So after this day, total searchers in the field swelled to 300, which included MPS, rescue squads, Air National Guard, volunteers, and student foresters. Moving on to Tuesday, June 17th, 1969, Ranger Foster began an intensive grid search at Spence Field with the 50 students from the Lake City Junior College from Florida. Trail searching also continued and extended out of probable areas into possible areas. All possibilities were checked as manpower was available. Anthony Creek and other Spence Field drainages were covered and recovered as they were every day. So they had so many people on this search that they were recovering spots that they had searched every day.
That's actually not... I think that's not a bad thing.
No, it just shows you how much manpower they had.
Yeah.
Special Forces Green Berets were assigned to the Eagle Creek and Jenkins Ridge Trail area. 50 Tennessee Air National Guard arrived to join the grid search at Spence Field. The U.S. Coast Guard had men and boats patrolling Fontana Lake. They patrolled the north shoreline of the lake and transported searchers to the trails and drainages on the north shore. Total searchers in the field this day topped 365 and included MPS, Rescue Squad, Student Foresters, the Tennessee Air National Guard, Maryville, Tennessee Volunteer Fire Department, Air Base personnel, U.S. Army pilots and crews, volunteers, and now Special Forces. So, and we're not even halfway to the high water mark for searchers in this case. So let's move forward to Wednesday. So June 18th, 1969. Rain from the previous night, so it rained again, created more difficulty with vehicle travel, and helicopters were limited during the day due to cloud cover. In all, on this day, 4 helicopters were used, 2 Hueys and 2 CH-59s. In Hueys, I'm trying to think.
I think this is it.
Is that, what's it say in the caption?
It calls it the Jolly Green Giant.
Jolly Green Giant.
But I feel like that's like the Nam helicopter.
Huey was the Nam helicopter, I think.
That's what I'm saying. That looks like that.
Oh, no, I don't Google it.
I am. Give me a second.
Because, the movie Full Metal Jacket, I think that scene where they're flying.
I was thinking of Tropic Thunder.
Or that. So while Joe looks for
that's a Huey.
Oh.
Here, see?
Okay. Yeah.
A little bit different because then this one's like
that one's like an old timey helicopter.
Yeah, it looks like a Bell almost.
Yeah. So the grid search continued with utilization of total Air National Guard forces numbering 97 troops. The trail, drainage, ridge tops, ridge contours, lakeshore, and other extensive areas were searched. A U-10, this is interesting, a U-10 fixed-wing aircraft was made available with a loudspeaker system installed. The plane was for Mr. Martin to fly.
Hold on.
Oh,
that's a CH-59.
Oh,
look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea what they only said 4. This one was clearly involved.
Well, there were more helicopters in the next couple of days.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was just on that Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like I said, a U-10 fixed-wing aircraft was made available with a loudspeaker system installed. The plan was for Mr. Martin to fly over the area and call the boy's name on the loudspeaker and give some simple instructions on how to make contact with some of the searchers. However, upon landing in the cove, the rear landing gear struck a rock and knocked it through the rear stabilizer, rendering the aircraft unusable. After repairs were made, it had to return to base. 22 more special forces arrived this day as well. Total searchers now in the field were at 615.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's so many people.
Yeah. So we're moving to Thursday now, June 19th of 1969.
That's like almost too many people if the kid is calling out.
Yeah.
Like helicopters, people, like dogs, how would you know?
Horses.
Yeah. Jeez.
So the search continued extensively. Animal excrement was checked. Pit toilets at trail shelters and fire towers were checked. Buzzards were watched, all with no traces of young Dennis. I just found that entries buzzards were watched. So they were like...
To see if they're circling
a carcass or something. So the chief ranger had telephone contact with Major Schnuber of the Eastern Air Rescue Service and learned that 3 more helicopters had been approved. The airborne infrared sensing device was discussed, but this was later dismissed as ineffective in this case. So that might have been an early version of like a FLIR type device.
Mm-hmm.
Total searchers in the field this day totaled 690. So we're still going up. Moving to Friday, June 20th, 1969. So the massive search continued with an additional 200 Tennessee Air National Guardsmen.
Holy cow.
On summer camp at Shelby, Mississippi. By the end of this day, there were over 780 people in the field searching for Dennis now. So we are now fast forwarding to June 21st of 1969. Total searchers in the field this day topped 1,400.
What is the area they're covering?
Well, I'll get into that in just a second here. So at this point, officials now are like, all right, we've got too many people out in the field. So the chief ranger requested the communications officer to call local radio and TV stations to request that no more searchers show up as of 10 a.m. So from what I read, roads are getting clogged. You've got so many inexperienced people just stomping around out there. People started getting hurt. So, I mean, 1,400 is, can you imagine? I mean,
Yeah, that's a ridiculous amount of people in that area.
Yeah. So we're moving to the 22nd of June. So based on horizontal map computations, the general coverage area of the search had reached almost 57 square miles. The intensive coverage area had reached 12.5 square miles. So they had searched almost 60 square miles and it found nothing. Wow. With 1,400 people. So it said the logical search area had been reached. Nothing at all had been found. The decision was made to redeploy searchers again in the morning of June 23rd. Search groups would start from Spence Field, where the boy was lost, and recover the area. So total searchers in the field this day dropped down to 1,000.
What's funny is before we got to that point, I was thinking, I'm like, why don't they just send every one of those people in the exact same route the kid went and all take a little bit of a different route?
Just like walk arm in arm and just go like in a line.
Yes. Like at that point,
right?
Like you'd cover so much ground.
Yeah. So it's now June 23rd, 1969. The level of volunteers dropped considerably as it was anticipated. Searchers were allowed to drive their personal vehicles to the campground parking lot. Heavy rains had moved in and curtailed the search efforts for a major part of the day. They did get a police dog from the Spartanburg, South Carolina Police Department, which was used, but again, no
like
results.
4 days of rain almost.
Yeah.
At that point, they're not going to have anything.
So total searchers in the field now has dropped down to 427. So they've lost a good chunk, but still 427 is
that's a lot of people.
A huge amount for a search party. It is now June 24th, 1969. This was when they thought they may have had a clue on, or they may have found Dennis. So a young boy wearing similar clothes to Dennis was walking the perimeter road of Cades Cove Campground, but rangers learned this was actually Michael Devlin, unrelated to the case or search, and they asked him to change his shirt.
Yeah, they have like 482 reports that they found him.
Yeah. So MPS staff had proposed at this point putting the search operation into maintenance mode on June 29th. Total searchers in the field had inched back up to 482. It is now June 25th, 1969. 33 special forces had left the search. The remaining 38 were planning to leave the morning of June 26th. 3 helicopters also left the search. The remaining one planned to stay until June 29th. So you can see the search is kind of winding down. On this day as well, all Tennessee National Guard troops had left. Superintendent Fry said in a press release that the search operation will be greatly reduced as of June 26th. All NPS personnel now on the search, which was about 75, will continue through Sunday, June 29th. If the boy is not found by this time, the search will continue on a limited basis for the next 60 days. Total searchers in the field had now dropped to 403 that day. June 26, 1969, another, what they thought at the time was a break in the case. Search crews checked a report of a decaying odor near the park line at the Tremont traffic counter. This turned out to be a dog carcass. Several reports of odors had come in throughout the search. A few were located, and all turned out to be bodies of small animals. So, it's got to be frustrating when you think you might have found something, and then it turns out to be a dead animal. But total searchers in the field now had dropped down to 121. So the search is really starting to dry up. It is now June 27th of 1969, a Friday. Rangers learned that Mr. Ed Crabtree, one of Martin's neighbors who had been in company with Mr. Martin on the search, had telephoned Tennessee Senator Howard Baker asking for 300 federal troops to be used next week. The regional office indicated that the search operation effort had been publicly significant to the extent that officials at the White House had been in contact with the National Park Service on this search.
Oh, wow.
So it made it all the way up to the White House at that point. And who was the president in 1969? Is that Kennedy?
Looking it up right now. I started looking at Nixon.
Nixon. Yeah. I know that. Kennedy was not president in 1969.
Nope, because Nixon was.
Yeah. It's late. So total searchers in the field at this point had dropped down to 68. Saturday, June 28th, 1969. Don't have a lot on this day, but the searchers in the field increased up to 196. So June 29th is kind of when the official search really ended. At 5 p.m., a meeting was held at the Cades Cove Operations Center with the Martin family. FBI agents and NPS officials were present. It was kind of a where do we go from here type of meeting. They determined that in the absence of evidence to support kidnapping, the FBI could not launch a full-scale investigation. So they were really pushing the FBI to get involved. But they can't commit resources unless they have some kind of...
At that point, what would they do different?
Yeah. What would they do different than the 1,400 people that were searching?
Yeah.
So on June 29th, 1969, the operation was closed down at Spence Field around 6 p.m., and all searchers had left the field. So, like I said, these numbers are mind-blowing. Like I said, this was and is the largest search that's ever happened in national park history. So listen to some of these numbers. Total man hours topped 13,420. Total man days topped 1,677. The cost of the search was $50,584, which in today's money, now this one was shocking to me, $408,000. I would have guessed it would have been way more expensive.
It's still, I think, the most expensive search, if like not relative time, but relative money.
Yeah.
Because I think the one we had, which is, they say is the most expensive one in national park history, wasn't it like $250,000 or something like that? It was like $250,000.
Yeah.
And we were like, wow, that's crazy. This is double that.
Yeah.
Just not in today's money.
Yeah. So total U.S. Army helicopter sorties, 938. Air Force helicopter sorties, 78. Total number of people airlifted, almost 13,000.
Jeez.
Total cargo transported by helicopter, almost 24,000 pounds. Total searches done by Jeeps were estimated to be 1,800 to 2,000. There were over 57 different rescue squads participating. And the rescue squads had a total of almost 70,000 vehicle miles after the search.
Jeez.
So,
at that point, you'd wonder like how many searchers got lost or injured, or like what was the toll taken?
Well, there were several actual injuries. I didn't list them in here, but one guy had fallen and broken his arm. Another guy had, two of them happened at camp. One guy cut his leg open really bad whittling.
Sounds like something we would do.
And one of the older guys slipped and fell and like hit his head on a Jeep. So like,
because there are just hundreds of Jeeps everywhere. He just like slipped and just hit a Jeep.
Yeah.
God. He slipped and hit his head on a Jeep. Just chaos.
I know.
Just people whittling and cutting themselves, breaking their arms, just pure. Yeah. Like the site leaders probably just at the one day where he's like, stop setting people.
Yeah. So
just pure chaos.
Before we get into theories, there were some false positives during the search that I found really interesting. So several days into the search, two men from Townsend noticed a shoe print near the west prong of the Pigeon River. It was the size of a child's Oxford type shoe, which Dennis Martin was last seen wearing. Dwight McCarter, a retired Park Service ranger who was on the search, said this lead was not fully followed up because searchers had already been in the area. McCarter said that at the time he was only 24 years old and still learning from senior rangers and other mentors. Today, he says the two things he most wishes would have happened were massive searches of the area where the print was found and of the Sea Branch area where the scream was heard and the rough-looking man was seen. So we'll get into that whole scenario in just a second, but McCarter would go on to say that the Sea Branch area is downhill from where Dennis was last seen, and it's possible for a physically fit man to carry a small boy between the 2 points. Perhaps more significantly, Dennis Martin could have reached that location alone. McCarter also goes on to cite several other reasons why the massive search could have missed Dennis or his body. He said that a 48-inch tall boy could easily elude detection in rugged mountain terrain, and especially in a road. How do you say that?
Hold on, I'm trying to find where you're at.
Click my circle.
There you go. Rhododendron.
Oh man, or a laurel thicket.
I actually know that one.
The sound of a roaring creek can prevent a searcher from hearing a child's shouts for help, and in some cases, lost and disorientated children have been known to hide from searchers. He also goes on to say, as for an animal attack, that is possible. Bears normally will not attack humans, but in June of 1969, their normal food source was greatly diminished, and near Spence Field, about 2 weeks before Dennis disappeared, rangers released a bony, scrawny bear caught in a wild boar trap, baited with corn, something that bears normally do not eat.
That's rhododendron flowers right there.
Okay.
Now, you could get lost in that, but you could also get lost in that one.
Wow.
I don't know if those are that big in the mountain, but that is for those listening, we're looking at a rhododendron bush that is, I don't know if that guy's
size of a house.
Yeah, if that guy's 6 feet tall, that's bigger than a house maybe. Or it's probably about the size of an entire house.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you could get lost in that. So
you definitely could.
Interesting. Yeah. So the bears in the area could have been really hungry because they're kind of starving that June. So that is a possibility that he was attacked by a black bear. I mean, a small child would be an easy target.
I would say that's a higher possibility because of his size.
Yeah. So that was kind of some false positives during the case. We have some weird things going on years later after the case. So a few years after Dennis was last seen, a man came across skeletal remains of a small child in Tremont's Big Hollow. The bones included a skull and were already being scattered by animals. The man kept the find to himself for years because he had been illegally hunting ginseng and feared he would be prosecuted. In 1985, he contacted McCarter, who we just talked about, who he knew personally, and told him about the skeleton. McCarter and 30 volunteer rescue squadmen from Swain County, North Carolina, searched the area but found nothing. By this time, they suspected animals would have had more than enough time to destroy the remains. The area is about 3 to 3.5 miles downhill from where Dennis was last seen, and in the same direction as the Oxford shoe print found by the West Prong River, McCarter said. And he said it's about 9 miles from where the scream and unkempt man were reported. So there was also about 16 years ago.
There's a lot of things pointing in that direction.
Yeah. And we're going to get into that scream here in just a second.
Okay.
I couldn't find a good spot to put that in. But they also had about 16 years ago, a man searching for his birth parents contacted park officials to explore the possibility that he might be Dennis Martin. Park spokesman Bob Miller said. Miller does not recall what made the man think he might be Dennis Martin, but after a quick comparison of the known facts of the man's life with those of Dennis Martin's, Miller said, we were able to put to rest the suspicion that he was Dennis Martin.
Well, I shouldn't be so quick to giggle at that, because if he did have some sort of mental condition, that could explain it. So if he was aware of in his adult life, hey, I have this mental condition, like maybe I completely forgot about it, or who knows? If he was like an orphan or something like that. So I guess I shouldn't laugh it off right away.
No, I mean, it's, you never know, but they followed up on it because this is still an open case to this day.
I just think of that TV show where they remember that TV show was on MTV where girls didn't know they were pregnant until they were having a baby.
No, I don't remember.
I think it was called like I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant.
Very creative with the name.
Yeah, it was something. I'm gonna look that up now but it was literally a show where it's like they went into some hysteria level where they just thought they were large or something like that, and then they like had stomach pain and they went to the hospital and they're like, you're delivering a baby right now. It was like a bunch of stories of people like that. I'm like, could you imagine?
Yeah.
So that guy thinking he might be that lost kid.
Yeah, you never know. So after this whole search and rescue debacle, the National Park Service kind of did a review of everything that happened, and they released a report. And the next couple of statements were about why they think Dennis was never found and kind of pointing to the chaotic search for him. Mm-hmm. So the main theme of their report was sometimes too much of a good thing can cause problems. They write...
like hitting your head in Jeeps. And
cutting yourself.
Also, the show is called I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Yeah. Don't watch it. It's not.
No, I won't. So as the search began, this is from the National Park Service memo, everyone kept feeling that the boy would be found in the next hour. And it was probably this reason why the search organization did not keep pace with the rapid manpower buildup. Park Superintendent Keith Nielsen wrote, This search This search developed so fast that we failed to realize the need for quick organization from the standpoint of manpower, overhead, and public relations. The large numbers of people would have overlapped or even obliterated new clues or signs of the missing boy. There were so many footprints, a mass confusion of footprints, McCarter said. The size and scope of the Martin search produced many lessons that led to improvements of future searches. It's the old adage of it being better to work smarter, not harder, Park Deputy Superintendent Kevin Fitzgerald said. We learned that flooding an area with huge numbers of people is not the way to go in all cases because you tend to lose some valuable clues and good tracking signals. Authorities also learned how to more efficiently manage searches. In 1972, in Utah, a loosely knit group of search and rescue workers formed a fledgling organization that became the National Association of Search and Rescue, now recognized internationally as a leading conduit for exchanging information and developing new methods. Though it was not a direct outgrowth of the Dennis Martin case, lessons learned from the search for him quickly made their way into the NASAR guidelines, McCarter said. So it is pretty cool that, sadly, they didn't find Dennis, but that chaotic search actually led to officials creating better methods for searching for people, which probably led to a lot of other people being found.
Yeah, the silver lining of a terrible event.
Yeah. So, all right, jumping right into theories.
Okay.
This is the fun part. So, right away, law enforcement thinks, this is what park officials and law enforcement thinks. They think he fell victim to hypothermia from the heavy thunderstorm and cold temperatures that swept through the night he disappeared. The area where Martin disappeared is marked by steep slopes and ravines. Wild animals such as copperhead snakes, bears, feral hogs, and bobcats inhabit the area. A downpour broke out shortly after Martin disappeared, dropping 3 inches of rain in a matter of hours, which washed out trails and caused streams to flood. Temperatures that night on June 14th dropped down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So Jeez. I think if we're looking at plausible theories, I think that is probably the most plausible, that he died of hypothermia and then got washed away in the huge storm. Family, what does family think? So the family came to believe that someone took Dennis. The afternoon that Dennis disappeared, Harold Key, 45, of Carthage, Tennessee, was near Rowan's Creek in the Sea Branch area with his family when he heard an enormous, sickening scream. A few minutes later, he noticed a rough-looking man moving stealthily in the woods near where he had heard the scream. He said, "I thought he might have been a moonshiner," Key later told News Sentinel writer Carson Brewer. Unaware of the search for the lost boy, Key did not report the incident until several days later, and he had returned home and learned of Dennis's disappearance. But Key did not recall the exact time this occurred, and part of the time frame he gave included a period that would have made a connection to Dennis Martin's disappearance impossible. Park officials also discounted the likelihood of a connection because of the distance from where Dennis was last seen, which we said was about 9 miles, and the FBI concluded it did not have sufficient evidence to launch an investigation. So, very creepy, this weird scream this guy heard, but they at the time didn't think it could have any connection to the disappearance. But I just feel like,
I think there's something there that they overlooked.
Yeah, and with, the guy's foggy recollection of the actual time of the scream, I mean...
Well, and you... All right, finish it, because I have theories on that. Let's go through the rest of them, and then let's...